This nation will rise up. This nation will rise up.
All right, family. So we back at it again. A lot of responses came out of the last podcast that I did, entitled "The Realest That I've Ever Posted." So I think I need to do a follow-up on that. There was a couple questions that I want to answer, so I want to make sure that I answer them in this next podcast. So we're gonna keep it short and sweet. We're gonna get into black liberation, corporate personhood, and how we're gonna make that work in our favor. You ready? Uhuru na nguvu.
No. You're looking at a free black man.
Talk Black 360.
You want to know what a free black man look like? Look at me.
Uhuru na nguvu. Welcome to another dose of Talk Black 360. I am your host, Tino Blaine King, the Kool-Aid and Kush, the pioneer of black pragmatism. I've got a very exciting show for you today. As I talked about earlier, we are going to be continuing on the topic that I posted earlier in the week, which was entitled "The Realest I've Ever Posted." And we're going to elaborate on that because as that podcast was played out, I've gotten a lot of good responses to it and some questions. And I knew when I put that up that there was going to be a need to have a continuation of that particular conversation about black liberation. All of that, right? Conversation, liberation. Anyway, so what I want to do today is I want to add to the context of that first podcast. And to do so, I had a response or a comment that was made by one of my brothers on Facebook, Brother Devin Floyd, and he had this to say: "I thoroughly enjoyed and appreciate the info you shared in this video. I fully agreed a while back when you said black liberation needs a business plan. And in the spirit of collaboration and unity, I'm curious as to what would or could make this potential corporation different from organizations that already exist, i.e. NAACP, Urban League, Nation of Islam, Black Lives Matter, 100 Black Men of America, Black Panthers, New Era, Detroit, etc. I'm sure everyone has their qualms about some of these and other existing organizations, but for the most part, I believe their missions are well intended. So how would or could this potential black liberation organization be different and not end up similar to these existing organizations?" Excellent comment and brilliant question. And in this comment is where I want to base the presentation of this podcast, or part 2 of this podcast, because that is a valid point. And I think all of our great liberation organizations and all of our black equality organizations or African American equality organizations start with good intent. But there is multiple different fronts that we have to address when we're dealing with the atrocities that was dropped in our laps by white supremacy. So in this podcast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer this question and also add some additional information to why I believe and also how I believe we can turn black liberation into a business and have it to produce a more desired result. And also, I think that there was no better time for this to actually take place than the present. As you've often heard me say, time dictates agenda. So let's take a look at this first clip.
We're winning. There's going to be an election in South Africa a few months from now because we're winning. There was a Middle East agreement signed on the White House lawn last Monday because we got the scars in our bodies. We're winning. We came here 30 years ago for the March on Washington. From Texas across to Florida up to Virginia, we couldn't use a single public toilet. We could not use a single hotel. We couldn't drink water from a single fountain. We did not have the right to vote. We didn't have a congressional black caucus. We didn't have 400 black mayors. We did not have the capacity to even think about foreign affairs, dealing in private survival. But just like when David knocked down Goliath, he couldn't go and party because Goliath wasn't no eunuch, he had some babies. And you knock down Jim Crow and you got Jim Crow Esquire. The giants keep coming. When Dr. King would make the case that we just end racism by law and get inside the plant gate with an education, we can grow. That was a period of economic growth. Now we get inside the plant and the plant is closed. Lastly, we beat legislation with Jim Crow, but now Jim Crow Esquire regulation. The giants keep coming. So in the face of all of these challenges, do not assume that our struggles have been in vain and not productive.
Okay. Look, there's nothing that I would ever say to minimize the work and contribution of Brother Jesse Jackson. I will continue to say that time dictates agenda. And the message that Brother Jackson has so eloquently narrated over the years, I think cannot be discounted. But I do think that this idea of equality often leaves us in a position of feeling and being or placing ourselves as inferior to other races in this society, in America and around the globe. And I don't think that that is the most productive mindset today for our leaders to have. Many thought at the time when Brother Jackson did have those ideas that that was not the best thing at that time. But many of those who were in that era and decided to be more aggressive with their conversation and actions didn't live to tell about it. So that's why I believe time dictates agenda. We've pushed the can, so to speak, a little bit further down the road. And now I believe with the advent of the technologies that we're using, such as this platform that I'm using to connect with all of you, I think we have the ability to see things a little bit more clearly. And I will also say that there's always been a faction of us who has seen things for what they were, but at some point may have seen them or had been a little bit ahead of their time. So with that, I want to bring to you an alternative perspective to that thought process, which comes from none other than the GOAT himself, Brother Farrakhan. Take a look.
And it is ignorance that is the worst enemy of the rise of our people to fulfill our destiny. That ignorance is fed on by corrupt leadership. Now, the scripture again says, woe to the shepherds who feed themselves and not the flock. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? Most of our leaders are handpicked by the very enemy that we're trying to get free from. But to get a public accommodations bill and a voting rights bill and then close black hotels because we sleep in white ones, or close black establishments so that we can spend our money with our oppressor, is not winning. Reverend Jackson, I submit. Wait. On one hand, we are winning because every one of these brilliant congresspersons, they represent us. They are brilliant men and women. These are brilliant people in front of us. But what good does it do to have a brilliant head not connected to a black body? Because little black people marched in the streets and suffered and went to jail to make openings for those of us who sit in leadership. Now we've got to unite at the top and develop strategies to free our people. Otherwise, we will be saying we're winning, but the masses keep losing. If we want the liberation of our people, then ain't none of us winning until all of us become winners.
Okay. I definitely am more personally connected to the concept of Brother Farrakhan, but I want to suggest to you this, that me presenting both of these concepts is not to minimize one beneath the other or to exalt one over the other. The reason I bring you both of these concepts is because we are, in fact, in need of both of these ideas. And when we talk about corporations and becoming a corporation as Black liberation, I think we have to take that into perspective. It's like the Corporation of America in American politics, where you have the right and the left wing, but both are ultimately presenting views on how they think the best way to move America forward is. And what I'm suggesting to you, that in its most extreme points, Brother Jackson, who is saying that now we're believing that drinking from the same fountains and using the same toilets and sleeping in the same beds as white folks is advancement and it's winning. I think that is not an accurate depiction. However, I do see the value in it, because without that incremental advancement, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I see that as one side of the bird. And when Brother Farrakhan says, if we're advancing in one hand, but in the other hand, we're diminishing our value as Black people by removing Black businesses and Black interests, then that's not advancement at all. I see that as the other side of the bird. So what we have here is the right and the left wing of Black power. And in corporate personhood, we will be able to embody both of these concepts and use them as a balancing mechanism to move our people forward. This is Black liberation, and this is the value of corporate personhood, so that we can understand that we must move in some sort of duality, and we must have the ability to see the 360-degree perspective of the problem that we're dealing with. So having said that, I want to recognize, before I provide this solution, or at least before I provide the additional information to this solution, I want to recognize again, recently you've heard me speaking about the ADOS movement. And it's necessary that I speak about the ADOS movement, because wherever someone attempts to align themselves with Black interest, we've got to test their genuine intent. You've seen me do that with Byron Allen, and recently I've been doing that with the ADOS movement. But I understand, remember, this is not a knock on ADOS movement. It is a knock on some of the ideologies that they hold. And the difference is, with someone like myself, when I put forth something that I believe is in the best interest of our people, I want to try to my best ability to understand what those who came before me had to say about these issues. So that's why you see me put up a lot of clips of our ancestors and our elders speaking to us, because it is necessary that we get that information at the same time or before we move forward. So with the concept that is presented by ADOS, I don't think anyone was able to verbalize this as good as Professor Smalls was able to do, an elder in the community who's traveled the country. helping us to understand the situation that we are in and giving us solutions to help ourselves to get out of it. I don't think anyone has, as of yet, articulated the relevance of the ADOS movement and the shortcomings of the ADOS movement as well as he has. But once I play this clip, there's another clip that I want to play for you so that you understand that there is a balance in my methodology. I do not look to condemn anyone who says that they speak for black people or that they want to speak to black people. But I say when you make the warrant that that is what you're doing, then it is up to people like myself and those of you who are out there listening to check these people with a level of respect. And you'll hear, as Professor Small says that in his video. Take a look.
To the ADOS thing. You know, I first learned about ADOS last year.
Right.
And I've been trying to study it. I even reached out to their people. You know, I told them some of the things y'all are talking about is good, the thing on reparations, but this anti-Pan-Africanism, anti-Africanism, anti-Caribbeanism, it tells me you're not studying. You don't know history. I don't know the young man, Anthony, or the lady, but I know they both come out of the system. They didn't come from our struggle and went to the next level. They were in the system that they got disenchanted with. And so then they came out, and this is their response to that system.
Right.
That we can organize some people that can cause you to lose some elections. I'm trying to be frank without being disrespectful.
Right.
I think the young people who have rushed to join them, based on the misinformation they've gotten, their hearts are sincere. They're just being misled.
Misled, yes.
You see?
Yes.
And so, a point that ADOS is trying to make, do the African Americans need to be clear on their identity? Yes. But you can do that without rejecting and attacking the rest of our people from around the world.
Yes, sir.
Because all of our people have an ethnic identity. So let's define and establish our ethnic identity based on the 400 years we've been having a common experience here in America and give a label to it that makes sense.
Okay, so Professor Smalls said that we should identify our ethnic identity based on the 400 years that we suffered, that encompasses the full body of our people. This is also in keeping with the Reverend. I'm sorry, not with the Reverend Jackson, but with the minister Louis Farrakhan said. We have to keep in mind that if the heads of our organizations aren't concerned with the large mass and body of our people, then they're not the leaders that we need to be representing us. So another thing that I wanted to bring out of that video was, at the advice of the elder, Professor Smalls, he said that if you want to embody this new technology, this hashtag trend or society and simplifying things that we do in the movement, that's perfectly fine with me, and I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. But as the elder said, let's use something that is going to encompass the full body of our people. So I began to put out the hashtag, not to replace ADOS. I don't really have a concern with how you are representing yourself. I have more of a concern with what your interests are as it pertains to our people. But I put out a hashtag, use it, take it, make a t-shirt from it, make money from it. It doesn't really matter. But what I'm concerned about is the philosophy of ADOS starting to diminish the unity of our people, not just here in America, but around the globe. So I created the hashtag African Diaspora in America. As Professor Small says, this is a title that does recognize all of our people, not just a segment of our people. And again, I'm not saying you have to use one or the other. I'm saying if the spirit of your movement is to bring our people together, then use that hashtag and let people know what that hashtag represents, and then bring people together in the spirit of unity. Do not bring us or try to bring us together in the spirit of just satisfying the status quo of white America, or trying to monopolize votes for some intent of reparations, or whatever the case may be. But let me break this down, or not break it down, but let me give you some other information that a sister said a while back, and I've used this sister's clip once before, and I did not give her proper credit, at least to tell you what her name was. So let me do that now. I found this clip on YouTube, and the sister's name is Julesy, Jouelzy. I did look at some of her other videos. Sister is pretty much at least speaking to the interest of black people, and she speaks in the perspective of African American being a culture, and not a ethnic group or racial group. It's just a culture. So I don't want to speak for her. She does have her own presentation of that. But I do want you to take a look at this very short clip of what she said. Take a look.
African American culture has never had the space to hold a piece of itself as sacred. What I mean is, in the way that other communities and cultures can say, you cannot do that, or at the very least, you cannot do that without me bringing you into the fold because you're not from here, we don't seem to have that same cultural privilege.
Okay, so this illustrates basically what I was saying about the value of ADOS. The younger generation is definitely looking to do just that, preserve their cultural boundaries, if you will. Makes all of the sense in the world. The only issue that I have is that in the intent of preserving your cultural boundaries, that you are not causing division amongst our people, not just our people in America, but our people around the globe. But we all have, like Professor Small says, distinct experiences with white supremacy, and we should be able to recognize those differences without diminishing the larger family. So I think we've narrated to answer the question that Brother Devin had brought up in his comment. There is two separate perspectives. So the final answer to that is this. What would make this concept of making black liberation a business is the idea that what we're looking to do is attain a level of corporate personhood, meaning that individuals are no longer going to be the focus of this movement. This movement will be systematic advancement because we're dealing with systematic oppression. And it will allow people inside the movement to not be able to dominate one way or another. But more specifically, why is it different from the other organizations that are out there? Not all other organizations, but the other organizations, I think, that have represented some form of black liberation. What makes it different than those is because we're going to exercise something that you would have seen in the previous podcast called plurality. Plurality is not going to have one specific concept that we all have to follow and abide by. It is going to allow all of our diverse thought processes of how we actually advance black people. Is going to allow all of those concepts and perspectives to hit the table. But we will move it forward in a more diplomatic prospect, or in a more diplomatic fashion, so that we can get to the intended, or at least we can get past this oppressive white supremacist system. So with that, I think that adds another piece to, blacks and black liberation being put inside of corporate personhood. I think it also brings together what you've heard me talk about before on some other podcasts about we must build black embassies, because the very conversation that I am delivering to you is the conversation that needs to be dispersed throughout our black embassies. So for those of us who have questions and concerns about the idiosyncrasies of our operations, then they can ask those questions in the embassies, and they can be coached, and they can be preserved in a way that future generations will be able to benefit from them. This is all basic corporate structure that I'm saying we need to begin to implement, because it is one way that the white citizen has utilized and capitalized on for their advancement, and it is a way that I believe us as black citizens and as a global black citizen can utilize this corporate personhood. And finally, the last thing that corporate personhood has showed us is that there is a reality of corporations being multinational, allowing them to better be able to circumvent some of the oppressive laws of nations. And as you know, there's a globe full of nations who want to rise on the backs of black people. And black people have not yet been able to fashion a resistance to this ideology of the world when it comes to race and when it comes to Africa versus the rest of the world. So this will give us the opportunity to do that. And we would ask that, or we would actually position ourselves in a way that we are recognized by other nations as a corporation. We should also seek to attach ourselves to the African Union, to be recognized by the United Nations, and just do what needs to be done for the advancement of black people. And if this is something that anyone opposes, black people included, then I think this is something that our people should be willing to fight and die for. So with that being said, we're definitely going to continue this conversation. I want to make sure that if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them down in the comment box. I'll read all of those in time, and I'll also carry them over into the next podcast that I do as I continue to build on this concept of black liberation and corporate personhood. With that being said, you know what you have to do until the next time. Stay strong and stay black. Ashe? This has been another dose of Talk Black 360.
No. You will never be enslaved again by no man.